Hi, I'm Mario Guerra, the two-time former mayor of the great city of Downey, and I'm here today with my co-host for this episode on their Zurich Lewis. He is the board member of the Cerritos College Board. Zurich, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mario. Glad
Good.
to be here with you.
Good, good. This talking politics is kind of fun. There's a lot of political things going on. First of all, everything going okay at Cerritos College?
Everything is going very well. We've got brand new buildings that I'd love to have you and any of your viewers come and take a tour of. We're doing very well, not only construction-wise, but certainly academics-wise, and we're on track to graduate a record number of students with degrees and certificates so we can get them into their careers and colleges that they're looking for.
That's great. I always love to hear it going on. Cerritos College is a great community college doing some awesome things. So, okay, so let's talk about politics. At least the things in the news the last couple of days, Katie Porter announced for her run for governor. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's a little early, but there's been a lot of chatter about the former vice president herself jumping in as well. There's her announcement saying that there was a strong consideration that she'd do it. And, you know, Katie Porter is not exactly beloved by the Democratic establishment, so she's not going to be one that would step aside even if Kamala decided to run. So she's got a very different...
She took on Nancy Pelosi, and that was kind of a big thing. So her and Nancy Pelosi are not, in the same part of the Democratic Party. But she was a good friend of Kamala Harris on there, and when she was in office from before, and supported her, et cetera.
Yeah, and they come from a different wing of the Democratic Party, the Elizabeth Warren wing, if you will, that is focused more on antitrust issues and focused more on the model of someone who is very pro-woman and very much more focused on things that are related to those issues rather than what has been the past era of what you might call the Obama era, right? Yeah. So it represents a different era, and I think that she, in just her own way and objectively speaking, this would be the next step to go about continuing her legacy. So we'll see how far she gets, considering there's a lot of other big names that had already announced gubernatorial races in the last few years. Yeah.
Former Mayor Viragosa, Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, Superintendent of Schools, former Treasurer or State Controller. So you're right. And then there's only a couple Republicans. One of them, Chad Blanco, the sheriff for Riverside, just announced. So trying to balance things out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and to my understanding, Attorney General Bonta opted not to run for gubernatorial spot. He is going to be running for re-election. There's also Tony Atkins, who was the former state Senate pro tem. And so, Katie Porter and Kamala Harris would block her out from, any kind of lane that she would be looking at. So she might have to drop down for another race. And so, it really depends on who ends up filing to run after all, because, you could see two Democrats getting in the top two unless there's one strong Republican. And if right now that strong Republican is only Chad Bianco, and, he should be garnering enough of the vote to be able to go into the top two. So we'll see. Steve Hilton might.
Yeah, Steve Hilton, another Republican on there. When you said earlier, Elizabeth Warren group, you're right. Katie Porter was mentored and actually was a law student of Elizabeth Warren, and so forth. So I never thought California can go any further left, but man, that would be...
I don't know. In certain ways it is a little more left, and in other ways it's a little more, it's just a different focus is what it is, right? Rather than focusing on the social issues, it's a lot more of like focusing on how big to grow the government and how much regulation there needs to be. I mean, Warren was very much a champion of the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and that has been essentially done away with by President Trump in that respect. So you can make arguments one way or another, but it's a different focus that could get some people more to come to the Democratic Party, but ultimately it's as being Republicans, it's the same failed policies regardless of what focus you put on it. It's ultimately growing the government that is going to continue to invade your lives and essentially try to be your savior when it ends up being failing pretty much every single time. Yeah.
So, and then in the same week, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, we have local politics, corruption, and all kinds of stuff in local elections and everything else. But then you also have our governor, which presumably is running for president. We've been hearing that for years and so forth.
Yeah,
but
much more than a presumption.
Oh my God, but on his very first podcast, I'm Gavin Newsom, he flips on a big position, goes more towards the middle, and now all the Democrats are in an uproar with him. And the flip was that he thinks it's inherently unfair for a transgender man to play in women's sports. He says, physicality makes a big difference. You got somebody at 6'4", swimming or playing basketball or whatever. But what are your thoughts? He literally just announced it, and everybody's like, whoa. We all kind of laugh because he must have seen the polling. It's like 80% of the country. Yeah. And even Californians feel that's just inherently unfair. So he's reading the poll numbers, but he's going towards the middle, and his base doesn't like that.
No, of course not. I mean, he's looking at a very different base than what he was going after for the last 10 to 15 years, and that was the San Francisco-based donors, the different people who represent the California Democratic Party. And now it's going to be the National Democratic Party that represents states that are a lot more to the right, than California. So it's obvious that, that he's doing the triangulation. But if you even look just 1 second into his record, you'll see that record is the San Francisco record to show, for example, even outside of just the transgender issue, it says, my office has never used the word Latinx. This is another 80-20 issue, and probably even more, 90-10. And you'll see at least 5 press releases that I saw on my X feed, where his office actually used Latinx. It's called a neologism of just something that isn't real, that is artificially put in to show we're trying to be extra inclusive, and it's virtue signaling rather than actually being inclusive of the Latino community that we are a part of, and that we know doesn't use things like that. If you look at the real Latin world, you just use Latin. Just use Latin. Everybody's Latin. Okay. Yeah. So
I'm a Latino. I'm a Hispanic. I'm a refugee. You can call me any of those things. Yeah. And in Cuba, they call me a gusano, which means a worm, because I left. So yeah.
Yeah, because you didn't want to be a communist. What a surprise.
I didn't want to be a communist.
Yeah.
So let's go to more local things. So Huntington Park, a big bust, FBI raid. It turns out the city manager lives in the city of Downey. There's a recall. There's throwing out of council people because they don't live in the city. But the big thing was the raid. So I grew up in Huntington Park, so I'm proud of the city. I've always have been. I graduated from Huntington Park High School. So a couple weeks ago, even before this happened, in LA Times reporter, we were talking about the corridor of corruption, which is southeast LA, right? Which, it had the issues in Bell, of course, the Southgate, Bell Gardens, and all these other cities. Now, Downey has always been above the fray. I'm not bragging. Well, I am bragging. We've elected better people, and we have better checks and balances and stuff. Now, you come from, the La Mirada area, so I wouldn't call you Southeast, but you represent Southeast because you represent Cerritos College, that's in the city of Norwalk. But what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we've always heard about all these things happening. We elected officials, locally elected, we've always known who those people are, but it continues.
It's been a while since something has flared up in that corridor of corruption, but, this one is, pales, in comparison to some of the money. The other ones were based on money, and so is this one, in the respect that there's money that is unaccounted for an aquatic park that would have gone in there. But for council to remove their colleague just based on the fact that she is taking care of her elderly parents in a nearby city, that is obviously something that you want to have a collegiality between your colleagues and to work together, because especially in a city that elects their council members at large, right? There's not a different kingdoms of, oh, this is my district, this is my district, this is my district,
Right.
and we all
Right.
kind of fight against each other, right?
By the way,
This is
how does
something.
that get by? How do they do that? How does that get by the California Voters' Rights Act? Because they're only being challenged, and we have one at large in 4
Yeah.
districts.
And it's always a racial aspect, right? It's
Yeah.
about saying that, a certain minority within the community that is sufficiently grouped together geographically and the quote statutory language is that they do not get to elect a candidate of their choice. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not enough Hispanics on a city council, there's not enough Asians, there's not enough whatever. It's about, well, here's a theoretical aspect of, well, this particular minority community in this area did not get to have representation, whatever that means, and
Sure,
it's
sure.
analogous and kind of a blob, but that's what is used by shady lawyers to get money in their own pockets, because the judges will go along with it because, well, we got to help the
So
minorities, even if it doesn't help the city itself.
Speaking of shady lawyers, okay, there's this Andrew Saraga that was on the La Mirada City Council for many years, wouldn't be made mayor. They finally make him mayor. He serves 6 months, moves in carpetbags over to Anaheim and runs there, gets his behind beat.
Yeah.
He's representing the city manager in one of those in Huntington Park. I saw him on TV the other day, by the way. So he threatens to sue the city of Downey. And unfortunately, the city of Downey is backing down. We have a very clean, good city council and city attorney and city staff, right? City manager is beyond reproach. So is the city attorney. But he's wrong, and he's risk adverse. So Andrew Saraga writes a letter. Oh, by the way, you have 4 districts, and you have 1 citywide one. You've had that for 60 years since your city, right? So everybody in the city, in my district, I get my representative, okay, and Mayor Hector Sosa happens to be in District 2, and I get the citywide one, Councilman Mario Trujillo. So I get two people representing me in that district. So he's saying that's against the California Voters' Rights Act, because we have the one at large one. Our city attorney saying, well, if you interpret it, we're at potential risk, so we should settle. So they're looking at maps now to make 5 districts. And we're an exception. I saw the tapes last night for a mapographer consultant, and the only other city like us is Oakland. Oakland has 1 citywide one and a lot of districts, and then the citywide mayor. But he was comparing it to Santa Monica that has 5, citywide ones on there. There's no comparison. So I don't understand. I think we should push back. So Andrew Saraga, so sue us. I mean, what do you have? How can anybody in our city be disenfranchised? And the popular vote in our city, I mean, we're 80% Hispanic. So your representation, So anyways, I feel like I'm going to be disenfranchised. I'm losing 1 representative. So how can that be good? And why are we settling? So anyways, I gave you a long background story that
No,
you
of
brought
course.
shady lawyers. And for us, our city attorney is not a shady lawyer, very good man. But I think he's risk adverse. I think we push back on Andrew Saraga and say, prove it. And first of all,
no.
show a plaintiff,
Yeah, no, of course. And, lawyers are, especially for a city, are always risk averse and say, hey, what's the safest route to go about? You have to weigh the balance of, the possible outcomes and whether it's worth, spending tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees to actually fight it. And so, the city council seems to have made a determination that, even if it may be better to have the way that you've always had it, then it's really not worth to continue an at-large or an at-large council seat in 4 different areas. So, there's pros and cons to it, and I tend to see it your way, of course, that it's worked pretty well for however long Downey has
60 years.
it's been since incorporation. It's been that way since incorporation, right?
Yeah. I don't see a con. I don't see something against it. The comment has brought up by a couple of council people, and they're good people. It costs too much to run the citywide. Okay, Ray, who cares? You're talking politics versus policy. And the problem is it actually disincentivizes people from running because you only can get the people that live in your district. What if the best people are in a different district? You could have 2 people from that, right? One that's already there and one that runs citywide. So I think you're limiting the amount of people who can actually run by having this. So anyway, I'm frustrated because they brought up last night, we only have 2 options, the citywide mayor or to make the 5 district. No, you have a third option. Third option is don't do anything. Mr. Siraga's sue us. And he's already asking for the money. He's been pushing to get the money and everything else. So it's like, come on, man. So anyways, when you see him on TV representing the city manager of Huntington Park that lives in the city of Downey, by the way, when his house got raided and somebody else. And anyway, sure. I'm frustrated on there. So I'm hoping our city council, hey, if you guys are watching this, there is a third option. Do nothing. Mr. Funk, I love you. I think you're a good city attorney on there, but you're wrong here and you should push back a little bit. We should spend $50,000. It's a great investment to keep it the way it is, okay, pushing back and fight this a little bit more. So anyways, okay, got off my high horse there, sir. So what else are your thoughts? What's going on? What else?
Other than that, just locally speaking, we had a Cerritos City Council race, which they have been able to keep their city council races in odd years in March because of their historically high turnout, which is fairly unique for a city. Cerritos has always been extremely politically charged because of how diverse their community is, and that's certainly one factor of it, but just a lot of money that ends up flowing through the city coffers because of the Cerritos Auto Square amongst other
they were the
reasons.
first ones to use redevelopment in a big way, with the mall money, the building the mall, and then the Cerritos Auto Square. And by the way, for people that are watching, as a local elected official, the biggest points of revenue, obviously, to our city, property taxes, believe it or not, it really goes down. The majority of property taxes goes to the school district, as it probably should. But you have retail and auto dealers. Okay, those are the 2 big ticket items that raise a lot of money for the coffers of city and general funds for the city. So Cerritos, they're kind of the ones that probably overuse the redevelopment money, which Governor Brown took away a couple of years ago. We used it. We brought Portos in with the redevelopment money. I'm looking out my window at the Portos parking lot. But now, how does Cerritos? How do they get their districts and so forth? They're citywide also, right? What are your thoughts on that? How do they get away with that?
Well, nobody's tried to take them on, and they've had a very wide and varied representation, both in people that come from different areas, certainly now, and as well as the different demographics and ethnicities that have been on council. Pretty much everyone that you can think of has been on there, and so Cerritos continues to keep it that way because of their increased turnout. And so we had something fairly unique that happened about a week ago, in that all 3 council seats that were up were open. The incumbents between Chungbo, Bruce Barrows, and Naresh Solanki either were term limited or they chose not to run for re-election. And so Cerritos also has something unique too in their charter, in that they have term limits only to take a break. So you take, you have your 2 terms, and then you must be off of council and cannot run for re-election. But after the next cycle that you take a break, you can come back in 2 years to run again. So there's no lifetime term limits like Downey has.
Which, by the way, I agree with that, because what
Yeah.
happens is, people have a chance to bring back somebody if they really want. And I understand the name ID or the name recognition of the power of the incumbency, if you will. But if you take a term out, then you're starting from scratch. You have name ID maybe from the past. But in Downey, for example, former Mayor Alex Saab, Dr. Roger Brosmer, folks like that can never ever run because they served their 8 years. That doesn't make any sense to me. So now we're taking away representation by this silly districting thing. Cerritos has no districts, and they're all citywide, and they can have a term that come back. Maybe that's a model that people should be looking at. But
Yeah, well, you're a charter city. Maybe put something on the charter for Downey residents to take a look at.
Yeah.
Over here in La Mirada, we're not a charter city. Most cities aren't, and they have general law, and so there are no term limits.
Right.
And we had a council member, Dave Peters, who was my professor at Biola University as well. He was a professor there for 49 years, but he served on city council for, I believe, 27 years, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
That he was on there, and I love La Mirada because of many of the things that all the people were able to do, because in part they served multiple terms. You have that institutional knowledge and that ability to know what happens. So
Right.
I think that term limits for lifetime, certainly, I think ultimately does more harm than good.
Yeah.
I can understand the argument for it, but ultimately when you have people that are serving there, and if the voters continue to bring them back, especially by very healthy margins, then they're probably doing something good for the city that someone else can try to replicate, but might not quite get there.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between a contract city and independent cities, and like you said, a general law city versus a charter. And just for everybody, a charter city is one that's got its own charter, which is kind of like its own constitution, and it could do things a little bit different on their general law city is basically on the rules that the state provides and so forth. So anyways, well, listen, sir, we've had some good discussions, and hopefully we can add to our viewership some intel for them on things that we're doing, or things that are happening, that we're doing. But I think the best way for people to continue to be vigilant is to talk about it, about things on there. We
Absolutely.
haven't even talked about national politics.
Yeah.
Every day we wake up and there's something new going on from a national, one day Canada's not going to send us electricity, the next day it is. Steel, no steel. And yeah, there's a lot going on. We can make a couple hour talk on that alone.
Of course. And one thing I was trying to lead up to before we got off on the bunny trail of general law and charter cities and so on is that the Cerritos City Council, for the first time ever, has a female majority council. And I believe not first time in a long while that they've had a majority non-Republican members. I mean, even though it's nonpartisan, there's still always that consideration as well. So, that's a fairly unique turn, and we'll see where it goes, and we'll be closely following it to be able to work together with them to make sure that all of our residents, at least from the Cerritos College aspect, get a good education.
Great. Well, listen, that's great.
Yes.
Well, Zurich, I always enjoyed our talks on there, and folks, please feel free to ask us questions, send us your thoughts, your comments, and anything you'd like us to discuss. This is the talking politics portion of it. Zurich, one last thing. This upcoming weekend is going to be the California Republican Party convention. It's called a nominating convention. We pick a new chairperson. It'll be up in Sacramento. I'll be there. I proudly have served on their board for 4 years as an elected treasurer, and the last 6 years as a budget committee chair. Any thoughts on the convention coming up in Sacramento?
And we'll see. And there's a lot of offensive positions that we need to take as a matter of reclaiming seats that we had that were lost in this prior election. And so we need to get some solid candidates, if not the same people who had those seats, before to make sure that we shore up our majority in the House. So
Right,
I'd be looking
right.
forward to
So-
that.
And
Yeah.
that's the one thing California, we've done a great job of helping. We have to pick and choose. We're in the minority in the state, but we can make a difference in some of those congressional races. And as Jessica Patterson always says, the House always comes through California. And
It does.
sure enough, a couple of the seats that we've won and made a difference on, that we brought in the supermajority on it. So anyway. Zurich, great talking to you as always, folks. My cell number is 562-706-4114. 562-706-4114. And I welcome you to watch and click and subscribe on Talking California, which is linked into Talking Downey, which is more regional. So, Zurich, thank you for co-hosting with me.
Always a pleasure, Mario. Thank you for having me.
All right, great. Take care.